I decided the best chance of helping my neighbor would be having the element of surprise on the burglars. So I jumped up and headed to my neighbor's house. Even though I couldn't see them, I guessed that they were probably at the back of his house, probably at his back door already. I didn't have the money for rifle-mounted night vision, so my night vision was back into my pocket. I took cover at the side corner of his house, and I peered around the corner with my rifle at the ready. It was dark, but I could make out their silhouettes. As soon as I saw them, I just started blasting. The only time I could see what was happening was during the split seconds that the blast from my rifle would light up the area. I don't even know if I was hitting them or not. They were scrambling and moving as fast as they could to get out of the area. I heard one of them shoot their gun, but his gun wasn't even pointed in my direction. He must have just automatically pulled the trigger of his gun as soon as I started shooting at him. Once the dust settled, the guys were gone. I knew my neighbor would be up after all the rifle shots, so I began yelling out his name. Ben, don't shoot! I just shot some guys that were about to break into your house. I also didn't want to get into a running battle with these guys in the dark. I knew that neighbors would be waking up and that many were armed. I didn't want to be chasing these guys in the dark and have someone mistake me as a bad guy in all the confusion. Almost immediately, Ben yelled back, "Where they at now?" "I don't know, they ran off." And no sooner than I said that, I heard a car being started about 4 or 5 houses away and for the car to speed off somewhere into the night. Within a second, Ben, who was armed with his own rifle, was outside with me. His back sliding door's glass was shattered. He told me that he had actually saw the guys through a sliding glass back door, and he had fired through his door at them also. We figured out that in the confusion of it all, that both he and I actually shot at the burglars at the same exact time, but we didn't know it because he was shooting from the inside of his house and I was shooting from the outside of his house. Using my little handheld radio, I radioed to my wife what had happened, and then we grabbed our flashlights and began trying to trace the direction they went. We began seeing blood on the ground and eventually followed it halfway down the block where the last bit of blood that we saw was a pretty sizable amount on the sidewalk next to the street. How many of the guys that we hit, we didn't know. Where we hit them at, we didn't know. Whether they lived or whether they bled out and died somewhere else, we didn't know. We called 911 and was put on hold for 15 minutes before a dispatcher even answered the phone.
You have reached 911. We are currently experiencing a high volume of calls. Please do not hang up. Calls are answered in the order they were received.
I told them what had happened, and when the operator found out that the immediate danger was over, she advised that an officer would be out as soon as one freed up. It took almost an hour before 2 cops riding in the same beat-up squad car showed up. I advised them that I was an off-duty police officer, so they took a brief statement, took a quick look at the shooting scene, and then they had to show them the blood trail. They told us that so many burglaries and murders had been taking place across the city that it was actually a good thing that some of them was shot up instead of the homeowners for once. They also advised us that the main police station would call us if something else came about it, but since there were no actual dead bodies actually laying around anywhere, that not much would be done about it. And they stated they were stretched so far and so thin that they were forced to expend their resources on the victims of murders, not on the shootings of criminals. It took me a little bit by surprise that the police didn't want our rifles as evidence. They didn't want much more than our names and contact information and a brief statement of what happened. I knew that in regular times that if something like this had happened, that there would have been a whole slew of cops that would have responded, including homicide detectives, and the police tape would have been hanging everywhere, etc. But not in today's world. There wasn't the money or the resources for these types of investigations anymore. In today's world, violence like this was happening on a regular basis. And now our worry was, if the burglars survived, would they be coming back with friends to exact revenge? Would they do a drive-by on our homes? And if it did happen, would it happen tonight, or days from now, or weeks from now? Or would they even do it? But it didn't matter. My adrenaline dump had kicked in and I was starting to get a pounding headache. Both of us agreed that we wouldn't be getting any sleep, and we decided to stay up and outside to watch for any cars that may come creeping down our street. And I suddenly felt helpless. While these criminals knew where I lived at, I had no idea who they were or where they were at. I wondered if I could ever sleep again in my own house. And I knew it was time to evacuate the city suburbs and head to the retreat, which hindsight now told me should have happened months ago. Things to consider. Do you understand that gunfights aren't like what you see in Hollywood? That people don't always drop down and die like they do in the movies? If food suddenly stopped being delivered, do you have enough food in your house to get you by until order gets restored or until you can make it to a safer area? If society started breaking down, do you currently live in an area where it would start becoming dangerous almost immediately? Or do you live in an area where you may have some time before it would become dangerous? Do you have night vision of any kind where you could see at night without giving away your position? Do you understand the effects that an adrenaline dump will have on your body and what to expect when you start experiencing the symptoms? Are you prepared that many times deadly force situations create a lot of confusion, and that many times what truly happened during a lethal engagement, even if you were involved in it, won't be known until it's sorted out at a later time? Do you have a working knowledge about bloodborne pathogens? Are you aware of how important it is to protect yourself from blood and other bodily fluids from other people? And as a prepper, have you ever imagined that you would just simply deal with any trouble that comes to your home's door with violence, and then that would just be the end of it? Do you consider the fact that any violence or force that you use at your home may make your home become even a bigger target?